Alrighty, I think we are live. Welcome everybody who's joining us. We'll go ahead and give a few more minutes for people to file in here. So just hang tight and we'll get started soon. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started then. I think we've got most of the people filed in here and people will just file in as we go. So welcome everybody to our webinar. My name is Kim and I am part of the Finley team. And we're super excited today to talk to you about paid advertising. It's come up a lot, and especially in the last year as we've all really had to go much more digital. It's something that small businesses, especially those that offer a service, have a lot of questions about. And I have the pleasure of having Rennie, our complete social media and Google paid ads guru, to tell us all about it. So Rennie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, a little bit about me. I am a former tech guy. So as you can see here, these pretty animations. I've been in the tech industry for about a little over 10 years. Manage a bunch of web and mobile platforms, bigger companies, 1+ million visitors a day. So we were in charge of essentially a lot of conversion rate optimization, really getting users to more or less pay for services or generate leads or a variety of other KPIs. So there's a ton of people coming down these funnels, a lot of things at work throughout some of these companies in the tech space. I left there though. It wasn't much fun, to be honest with you, and wasn't doing as much as I would have liked to do. So I left there in 2013, started my own e-com company. That went well. Ended up selling that a couple years ago or years later. And after we sold the company, I had friends, acquaintances, friends of friends kind of catch wind of the success we had, and they wanted some help on their stuff. So I started getting some referrals, and that's really how I got into the client game. So I've been working with these guys even before we sold the company for going on 7, almost 8 years now. So we do a lot of e-com because, like I said, that's kind of the background of the company that I started originally. But again, my background here, as you see, is tech as well. So do a lot of tech stuff, B2B, SaaS stuff, as well as small business, a lot of small business stuff. So that's kind of my background.
Great.
Let's go to the next one.
Yeah, no, we're excited to have you here. And I also wanted to point out that at any point in the webinar, if you have questions, just throw them in the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and I'm going to start answering them as we go. So any questions about social media advertising, get as specific as you want for your business. We're really here to help answer them. So before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of what all this is about, we'd love to know a little bit about who's in the audience. You know, are you a tutoring business? Are you a photographer? Who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Throw it in the chat. It'll come to Rennie and I, and then we can maybe cater some of our slides to you guys. So we'll give you just a few seconds. If you're up for it, throw it in there, and then we'll get started. Okay, lots of interesting businesses coming through. All right, we got a mix here, Rennie.
All right, good. Mixed bag.
Yeah.
All right, good.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the next slide. So Rennie, but what is paid digital advertising, right? We all have like a different definition. Can you kind of really hone in on it?
Yeah, to summarize it, paid media is essentially, I call it pay to play, right? So in the shortest form, you're diverting attention from people, right? In a lot of cases, this is something that is most prevalent. You know, everybody's seen Facebook ads, right, or Instagram ads. That's an easy example, right? You divert attention from a consumer's experience, and you drive them to, most likely a website or a landing page to complete an action that you want them to do. It could obviously be outside of Facebook, Instagram, etc. But that's essentially what what it is in a nutshell. Now, on social, that can be, a video, that they put up there on Facebook. You click on it, drives to your site. It can be an image, it could be a GIF, it's kind of an animated image. But anything really to divert your attention off of, something that you are doing, and to the advertisers, generally their landing page or their website, so that you can complete an action that they want you to do.
No, that's great. I mean, it basically boils down to two things, which is you're either paying for someone searching for something to appear when they are searching for it, or they are on a platform and scrolling and you interrupt them, very targeted with a messaging that they should be interested in. That's great. Awesome. All right. So there seems to be we've kind of defined what paid media is. there's really these, like, I think especially for our customers and our small businesses in general, there's these two big buckets. One is paid social, and then the other one is this Google engine that is pretty complex, but we know we all have to be there when someone looks for, a pet store or a daycare center. We want to be the first ones to pop up. So can you maybe kind of go into like paid social a little bit more, and then we'll kind of go into Google, and maybe we can give a few examples.
Yeah, absolutely. So the most prevalent, like I said, everybody is on Facebook all day. I think one of the stats I remember off the top of my head was like people check their mobile phone, and this was like 4 or 5 years ago, so it's probably worse. They check it like, I think it was 14 times per day. I mean, honestly, it's probably like 30 or 40 at this point. So they're on Facebook and these social platforms all day, all the time, right? So it's an easy spot for advertisers like myself, a bunch of other people to get on there, put an ad in front of you, right? And divert your attention elsewhere. Like I said here, it's generally an image, video, GIF to drive people from Facebook, Instagram, etc., to your landing page or website. So that's paid social. Again, it comes in, it can be a variety of different platforms. Like I've already mentioned, Facebook and Instagram. TikTok and Snapchat are two other ones that come to mind. They're growing pretty quickly, but there's a ton of them out there. Those are just kind of the major players.
So I'm gonna pick a random person in the audience, and just maybe we can go through an example. So let's see here. Let me scroll through. Okay, it looks like we have Lauren in the audience. Hi, Lauren. And she's got some local pet stores. So what would be an example of like a Facebook ad or an Instagram ad that would be helpful for Lauren and her business?
Yeah, so it's funny. The business I sold was a pet business. So right down the pipe. Yeah. So I hear you, Laura. So for that one, there's probably two things that I would do for that one. What I would do, depending on the budget, is, and I haven't got to the search engine marketing yet, is, and let me brush up on that real quick, Kim, because it's going to be part of the.
Okay, sure. Let's go into search a little bit.
Let me touch on that. So paid search engine marketing is more or less like you mentioned. It's Google, right? It's also Bing. There's a couple other smaller players. More or less, that's paying to get to the front of the line, right, on those ads. Everybody else has, is organic search, and you have to do a lot of work to get that organic search. In a lot of cases, you have to be around for years and years, have a lot of articles, content, etc., for them to rank you to the top. It's pretty tough, right? So a lot of people, when they come,
just to clarify, Rennie, when you say organic, that means it, like, you're not actually paying for anything. Google just happens to serve up your content when someone searches.
Exactly. So yeah, I'll take it back a little further. So yeah, so you have results that are, just natural. We call them organic, right? They just, Google ranks you how they rank you. If you come to the top, then that's an organic listing. If you say, hey, by the way, I just started this business like last month or whatever, or I don't have the time to work on SEO for a year, right? You can, I call it pay to play. So you can pay to get the first placement, right? By paying for sponsored keywords, right? So in this case, grooming, and I know is a big one. I had a Siberian Husky, right? He needed to be in there all the time, right? So I would either go on Yelp or Google and say, groomer near me, right? Or a lot of cases, cheap groomer near me, right? Or groomer for Siberian Husky that sheds all the time.
Or best groomer near me.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what a lot of people are probably doing in this case. And what I would do in this case is, again, generally depending on the budget, I would probably focus, it's a service-based business, especially in a physical location outside of 3 miles. I don't know what location it is outside. It's 3 miles in LA. Nobody's driving there, right? So let's say it's 20 miles away. You don't want to bid on searches that are coming 20 miles away. Those people are not going to drive to you, especially in LA, maybe some other cities or locations. But what you want to do is you want to bid on keywords, right? Focused on dog grooming, any other services you have, maybe some of the products, probably just the services. Those are generally where the margin is. And you want to keep it to a smaller geographical range. So I would put a lot of the budget, I'd probably put 80% of your budget into just those keywords that are going to drive people to, your services, right? People that are searching, and those are going to be the most relevant ones. Those are the bread and butter, right? Those people are ready to buy today or tomorrow or this week, right? The remaining 20%, I would probably apply to paid social. The biggest platform being Facebook. I probably put about 20% of the budget to Facebook, depending on the volume of traffic you get to your website, for example. So what you can do there, and I don't want to get too detailed in this conversation, but what you can do there in a nutshell is you can actually put a pixel on your site. Very, very simple. This isn't like super techy stuff. Put a pixel on your site, and Facebook helps you do this. They have great instructions. Put the pixel on your site. So when a person comes and lands on the site and they go back to Facebook, you can actually know the previous visitors to your site, and you can tell Facebook, I only want to serve this ad to the people that have visited my site, right? That's called a retargeting ad. What I would do with the remaining 20% is I would do a retargeting ad to those 20% of people that have, or the people that have come to the website, so that you can get back in touch with them. You can do special offers. Here's 20% off the groomer, right? Here's 20% off any product. Those help drive people. But the people that are most likely to convert are the people that have already interacted with you and know who you are. So that's the low-hanging fruit on Facebook. And that's really how I would apply the strategy and the spend for a pet store.
And when you say convert, and again, because there's so many buzzwords, right? You're meaning that they essentially become a customer of yours.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So if it's an e-commerce company, for example, like for us, we were selling dog products, they would come and buy a dog product. That would be a conversion.
Right.
For this, a call might be a conversion, right? Hey, I want to book a grooming appointment for Friday at 3. It could be a call. They could actually take a payment on the actual, site. It could also be perhaps a lead, right? They, put your information in here. We'll be in touch with you.
Yeah. Add them to a newsletter that they get discounts. So what I'm hearing is basically the difference between a Google and a sort of social, so like Instagram or Facebook, is a Google is really an active, right? Like someone is actually looking for something. And for the case of, I think a lot of people on the phone who are offering services like daycares, I see tutors, I see pet stores. This is really interesting because it's someone who's actively looking for a math tutor, or someone who's actively looking for, a daycare center in their neighborhood, and it's more likely to convert. Whereas like a Facebook or an Instagram is more passive because they're sort of scrolling or they're interacting with their own Facebook, and it kind of pops up to interrupt them about something that could be interesting to them.
100%. You hit the nail on the head. The people that are searching are interested now, right? The people that you're hitting on Facebook, they're your target audience, right? So they might be dog owners in general, outside of the retargeting thing we're talking about. Yeah. They might be dog owners, but they might have a dog that has super short hair, might not need to be groomed. They might already just got their dog groomed, right? So you're hitting the target, right? But it's not going to be, it is more passive, like you said. It's not going to be as direct. For any sort of service-based business, especially with a physical location, if people are searching for you, you want to take as much low-hanging fruit as possible and put the budget toward that, right? Especially in a physical location, because they're not going to come and use your services 40 miles away, right? You want to narrow it, and you want to make sure you focus on the people that are searching for your business today, for sure.
I love that distinction, right? It's like on Facebook and Instagram, you're targeting your target market. So let's say you are a photographer, you're targeting, let's say maybe people who have weddings coming up soon or something like that. Whereas if you are actually on Google, you're targeting something specific that someone is searching for, not necessarily that target audience.
Correct.
Yeah.
Generally what it is you have dog owners, right? On Facebook, I'm a dog owner, right? Blah, blah, blah. And you can get in touch with them and, as you said, interrupt them, right?
Yeah.
On Google, it's a few steps ahead where the dog owner's already made the conscious decision where I need this service, right? So they're a couple of steps ahead in the buying life cycle, and they're almost ready to go where they're actually searching for it. So you want to take advantage of the people that are already ahead of the curve and looking for your service as much as possible. And then when you kind of maximize that, you take advantage of all that, then you can kind of hit the people that are more passive and kind of introduce them to your brand. So when they are ready to buy and they are over here in the life cycle and getting ready to search, they already know who you are, and then they just type your name in.
All right, well, let's keep going because I know we got a few more slides to go here. So I think we've actually hit on this pretty well. Anything really to note for small service businesses on LinkedIn or Snapchat? I mean, that feels not as relevant to me.
Not local small business, not local stuff. LinkedIn has some stuff on there. It's pretty expensive for the service industry, especially the physical locations. Only thing you might want to do there is you can actually target people by job title. If there was some B2B kind of between a physical location, you know, there's some B2B stuff, you might want to take advantage of that. I would stay away from some of the campaigns that are a little bit more pricey, and you can do things like sponsored message campaign, where it's just like you write a message and you say, hey, by the way, I want to get in touch with, you know, look, for example, if the groomer was looking for dog groomers, right, and they were looking to recruit them, you can go on LinkedIn and say, I'm looking for dog groomers, and you can send like sponsored messages to the dog groomers, and those are pretty cheap. I mean, you can get those for, you know, much cheaper than the other ads on LinkedIn, and they're actually very they convert at a high rate. Yeah.
So I have a question. We have a couple questions coming through. I want to make sure we address them. You just, and actually it's interesting, right? Because you just said they're pretty cheap.
Yeah.
What does that mean, right? So you know, let's go as another example. You know, let's kind of scroll through here. Okay, so let's say I have a tutoring center. You know, do I spend $100 on Facebook? I mean, obviously it goes back to your budget, and I know we'll get into this, but do you have to spend a lot of money here? I mean, is that a misconception, a myth?
You don't have to spend, I mean, it's relative, right? You can spend as much as you really want. I mean, that's one of the, you know, that's the beauty of all these platforms, is you can spend $5 a day, or you can spend literally 500K a day. It's built for everybody, right? And it's beautiful because it kind of brings it kind of evens the platform from like Joe Schmo down here to like, you know, the big behemoths up here. So you can spend, I mean, you can spend $10 a day on here. You can spend $20 a day. Really what you want to make sure is, like we talked about before, is if you're going to spend the money, give yourself a budget and just be smart about where you spend the money, right? If you, like I said, if you had, let's just say $100 a day, right? It's an easy number. If you had $100 a day, or let's say it's $20 a day, because that's probably most people. Let's say it's $20 a day. You probably don't want to spread yourself too thin across all these different areas, all these different platforms, right? You probably want to put all your budget into one, right? So that's the first strategy, is, you know, make sure you know where the best kind of platform for your audience is, and maximize your dollars there, right? And when you start building a budget, then you can think, okay, maybe we'll start at Google, then we'll transition to Facebook. As you scale out from there, maybe, you know, LinkedIn will be okay. But to answer your question, Kim, I mean, honestly, a lot of people start out pretty small with this stuff. They dabble in it. They try to figure out the game. The name of the game is optimization and testing. Very data driven for this stuff. So you don't need a lot of money to get started, but you can scale it pretty quickly as well.
And sometimes I think when we hear the words like it's data driven and it's optimized, and, you know, a lot of our small business owners, right, like they're passionate, and their skill set is in the thing that they're doing, and not necessarily in some of this stuff. So yeah. Is Facebook, for example, or Google, I mean, have they created a way for kind of anybody really to be able to do this? I mean, is it hard? Are there tutorials that you recommend?
Yeah, I will say that the platform on the back end of some of this stuff, there's a lot there's a lot of functionality built in for like pro level, right? If you want to just get in there and serve basic stuff, which is what most people need to do that are spending, you know, $20 to $30 a day. You don't have to use all the bells and whistles that the basic stuff that they give you is pretty simple to get in there, right? And that's probably what I would recommend before I hire anybody, is if you're spending $20 a day, get in there and try to learn it, right? You're gonna have some hiccups, but as you understand the data that's coming in, you're gonna get better at making the decisions on what do I do next. And so they do have KPIs built in there, and we'll go over some of those in a second. But as long as you know the basic KPIs in there and what they really mean, how they interact with others, then you should be able to kind of make decisions based on that data coming in. And there's not like I said, there's a handful of them that you have to know. They'll give you a ton, but there's a handful that you have to know to make those decisions to get started.
Cool. I know we were going to get into that. So let's keep going here, and please keep sending in your questions. These are great. I was just going to say, you know, you have the ad, right? We've got that going. But then what, right? Where does the ad go to, and how do we make sure that actually works with everything else that you've got kind of in the web universe?
Yeah. So a lot of people, now that you got the ad live, you're like, oh, I can sit back and relax, which is not the case. That's generally just the first part of it, but that's a good part of it, right? You feel good about bringing people that are actually interested in your service to your site. I mean, I've been there when I was sending, a few bucks a day. It feels good knowing that people are, coming through. And at the same time, if you have chat set up or you have other kind of features that contact us, you'll get a lot of good qualitative stuff coming through. Hey, by the way, what about this? Oh, I didn't even think to add that to my website. I should do that, right? So there's a lot of good stuff that's going to be coming through that you, again, want to continue taking those data points, taking those insights, taking what you're seeing from the data and hearing from the customer and apply those to everything after, the user clicks the ad. That there's the main thing that you want to kind of focus on, and that's the last bullet here is your landing page or your website, right? A landing page is just somewhere that you land after you click. And so you want to make sure you optimize that. Again, there's a lot of sales objections that come through. Hey, I think that's too pricey. Oh, well, actually it's reasonable because X, Y, Z. You might want to add that stuff to, your landing page. That's the sort of stuff you want to focus on after you start driving the traffic, right? At the same point, there's a lot of stuff you can do.
I'm sorry, I think it sounds like we're getting a little bit of audio issues on your side, Rennie. So I'm gonna just see if I can summarize quickly. So it looks like what I'm hearing basically is you have a really good ad, but if you don't have the website that matches that or has like the contact us button or has that 1-800 number or any kind of number to call, you're going to maybe lose someone converting.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, a lot of stuff is going to be based on the customer feedback. You guys hear me? The audio, okay.
Sorry, guys, we're having a little bit of difficulties with the audio here, so bear with us. And we should be on our way. Thanks for bearing with us. I know this sometimes with the audio here, there's a hiccup. So I think Rennie's going to come back in a second here. But we'll go ahead and continue. And I think just to kind of hone in that point is really making sure that your website has the information that is relevant for the person who's either searching or you've interrupted in their social feed to have that kind of information on your website. So to make it really easy for them to call you or to schedule a tutoring session or to sign up for your martial arts class. And making sure that's really at the top of your website too. People don't like to scroll and they've just clicked into something to find out more. So they really work hand in hand in terms of you've got to have the ad, sure, but then you got to make sure that the ad really drives something that people can then take an action on. All right, I think we're going to try and move to the next one. Yep, so this is all about exactly what we just talked about. The really cool thing, and this is what I love, and I'm sure Rennie will be able to come back and talk to this a bit more about digital, is you can test, right? Like I think the old form of marketing where you've got a flyer or maybe you've got a billboard or something like that, you have very little understanding if it's working or not. Whereas a Facebook ad or even Google, you can test different offers, right? So one couple weeks you could say, if we go back to the pet grooming example, you could say, here's a Facebook ad and it's 20% off, all grooming, limited time this month. And if that works, you can start doing more of that. Maybe it doesn't really work. And so maybe the next week you try something different. Maybe it's, buy one grooming session, get the second one half off. So the really great thing about this is you can test. You can test a different ad every week in terms of what's getting people in the door. Welcome back, Rennie. It wouldn't be a normal webinar if we didn't have some sort of difficulties, right? So, but we were just kind of going over through the beauty about testing, right? About being able to just kind of change one thing, and that could really change the way people are coming in. So go for it.
Yeah, 100%. So I don't know if you guys could hear me.
Yeah, we're all good now.
Okay. So what I was saying on the last one, it kind of leads to this point is like you can driving out the traffic. Again, it feels great. You're driving traffic from your audience. It's awesome. But it really comes down to like the name of the game is converting people from visitors on your page to doing what you want, right? And so there's a lot of different testing that goes into that. The foundation of this is very simple. This isn't like tough stuff, but this is easy to implement, is getting some analytics and data on the site. I know a lot of small business owners don't really want to dig in there's a lot of primary metrics you can take a look at that are very easy to set up. One of the things I would set up for any website, any small business owner, is Google Analytics, right? So in a lot of different page builders, WordPress, Shopify, all these different sites, all you have to do is literally copy and paste something into a little field. They have it already set up, super simple. So I would do that, because then you'll have the data coming through, right? Because if you do tests, okay, the only metric you have is, are people booking? Are they calling? Are they filling out a form, right? Or are they buying? You don't really know what's happening between they click, they land, and maybe they don't buy, right? Or a couple people buy. Like, how do I figure out what's happening here? And that's where you implement the Google Analytics, right? So you can see not only the different pages people look at, you can see how long they're on the pages. There's also, like, mouse tracking and eye tracking even in there. So you can figure out, like, are people landing, or are they even scrolling, or do they just leave, right? So there's a lot of things that you'd want to do to focus on figuring out, again, what happens after the click and before they actually do that action that I want them to do. And that really comes down to what's called conversion rate optimization. A lot of testing, a lot of variables, a lot of stuff to do in there.
And I think the key here is, because it can be incredibly overwhelming, right? We live in this world now where, like, basically, like, data, there's so much data that you can look at. And I think the key, and I remember when we first started working together, Rennie, I was like, oh my gosh, there's, like, so much. And I think the key is, especially for small business owners, is, like, pick one or two things, right? And focus on that, right? I think it's really hard to do everything, and it's impossible, and you're not going to become an expert overnight. But just pick one or two things. And it's like, for example, to me, the most important thing is this driving traffic? So are people coming? And then the second thing is, are they doing what you want them to do? Are they purchasing from your business? The one thing also I've noticed sometimes, especially with some small service businesses, is when you land on their website, there's so many options, right? It's, you can call, you can submit this, you can do that, there's this service. And so trying to hone in on one specific thing, I think, is also perhaps something to consider. I mean, what would you say to that?
Yeah, focus is big. Again, like I said, it's focus with budget is one thing, right? If you have a huge budget, you can do a bunch of things, right? It's the same thing with attention. If you have a lot of people coming, you can drive people to multiple different actions. But what you really want to do, especially on the service-based business, you don't want, here's a phone call button, here's a form, here's a buy button, right? You want to make it super streamlined and send them down a path to what you really want them to do. You want one main call to action on the site. And you nailed it, Kim. There's a couple simple KPIs that you really need to focus on. Like for this, for a campaign like this, for a small business, I'd focus on, like, first of all, on Facebook or Google, are you getting people to the site in a manner that is cost effective, right? And so are people actually clicking on your ads? Like, are you doing a good job on Facebook? The thing to look for in there, and I think we're going to get to this maybe in the next slide here. This might be a good liaison.
Yeah.
Yeah, right here. Okay. So we skipped ahead a couple of times.
That's okay.
So this is, so on the fly. But this is a good thing. Like, if you're getting a good click-through rate, which is essentially a percent, it's a ratio. I don't want to get too technical. It just means more or less of the people that are getting served all those ads, right? The images that you're putting on Facebook, for example, what percentage of those people are clicking? So there's a threshold generally, right? For most businesses, it ranges, but you want to get that above, like, probably 2 to 3%, right? If you're doing a good job getting people to the actual site or the landing page, then, like Kim said, there's a couple other, operative metrics that you want to focus on. One of them is either pages per visit, right? Are they actually scrolling through and checking out a couple things? You got 4 or 5 pages, that person's going to be interested. Or is it one page, I'm out, I wasn't interested, right? That's one of the things that I would take a look at. There's another time on site, which is going to be very similar, which is, essentially a similar proxy, which is, are they scrolling through the page and reading the whole page? Were they on the site for 4 minutes? You can tell they're engaged, right? That's a good KPI. And then, like I said, at the very bottom where you were hitting on, Kim, is the conversion rate, or the rate at which the users are hitting your page and actually doing your action, right? So generally you want to get that one above, let's say, about 3%. A lot of people, when they start out, are around 1. That's what I'm saying. It takes some time, in optimizations, but those are the metrics you really want to focus on. It's a very, it's an optimization game. It's just kind of twisting knobs and changing things one after another. Each day, each week, you're gonna see little improvements, but over time they aggregate. And, you get happy to see the improvements over time, because it doesn't happen just overnight, right?
Yeah, it's always so exciting when you have like a ding that comes in, and I also wanted to say, because again, a lot of, it sounds like a lot of you on the phone or on the phone, on the webinar, are service businesses. And one of the really cool things that Google Ads does is you can actually put a phone number like in your Google ad, right? And so, I mean, can you talk a little bit about that, Rennie? Because it's not necessarily just getting people to, I mean, your goal could be getting to your website and calling or scheduling an appointment, but they could just do it right on the ad. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't hit on that. So there's a variety of different ads that you can use, and you just nailed one of them. For a service-based business like a dog groomers, or a lot of service-based business like the tutor center, right? If somebody's interested, unless they're going to buy on the website, you probably want that phone call, right? You want them to call you and set it up. So that, again, talk about focusing, right? That's probably your primary, is like get calls, right? So if you drive into a website, call us now, right? Or get in touch. And like you said, you can bypass the website or the landing page and just have a Google ad, dog groomers, Santa Monica, specializing on big dogs, takes, up to 2 hours, $59, whatever, special, right? Click here to call today. Click, and then it'll, on a mobile phone, it'll just initiate a phone call, right? Desktop, it's going to try to initiate a call as well. But yeah, it's a lot easier if you're looking for calls to do it from like a Google ad like that. You can generate a ton of calls for sure. So that's the low-hanging fruit for the service-based business that I would definitely focus on.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to trying to minimize the number of clicks to get that action. Yep. Right. And so I love that Google ad for that purpose. Whether you're a tutoring center, whether you're daycare, normally if someone's searching, they just want to get in contact with you to either schedule the walkthrough or schedule something, or just honestly talk to a human about your services, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we got a couple of questions coming through, and I know we're kind of coming up in the last 10 minutes here, so I want to make sure we address them. So one of the questions we had was what makes a good Facebook ad?
That's an interesting question. So you can ask a bunch of people and they probably tell you different answers. But again, it comes down to the numbers, right? You can look at an ad and be like, that's beautiful. Well, maybe nobody's clicking on it though, right? Is it really a good ad? So really the proxy of a good ad is what we were just talking about here on this slide, which is that click-through rate. Like, are people clicking on it in a rate that you're getting cost-effective clicks? So that's literally pure and simple. Like, that's the metric. If you do a good job, you may be at 5, right? So you put a video up, or you put a special, let's say the dog groomer, first time special, 50% off, right? Those things are going to get a lot of click-through. Specials do really well. You might be at like 4 or 5% on the click-through rate, right? If you just throw up a blah ad, the image is kind of boring, you have too much text, it's not really a call to action, you might be around 1, right? And so that's why you need to kind of be able to interpret, those percentages and the KPI to determine, is this a good ad, or do I need to improve on that?
Yeah, and I think I remember having someone tell me this once, where it's like, especially on Facebook and Instagram, what you want to avoid is being wallpaper. And I think that was, key. How can you kind of like video, and something that I think has come up in the last year, especially with the advent of TikTok, which I'm by no means an expert in, is people like seeing the people that are behind the business, right? Yep. And so even selfie videos of you being like, hey, this is my martial arts studio, really excited to be in, Arcadia, and come by, try a free class. I think what the cool thing I think that's happened in the last year is people just want to know the humans behind these incredible small businesses, right? Because you're the ones that are making this run, and they can relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, you can really boil everything down in digital marketing to like, do they trust you, right? Yeah. And you just hit the nail on the head. Like, people, whether they know it or not, are going to make that decision based on like viewing you, seeing you, right? It's a little harder when it's just a website, here's what we do, blah, blah, blah. So if you have a good presence, and some people don't, that's not their fault. But if you have a good presence, by all means, like, yeah, people love seeing the face behind it. They love hearing like the real story. This is why I created it. Here's the story. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. They love that stuff. And even outside the story, a lot of people, some people aren't going to watch video, but a lot of people will. And they'd rather watch like a 30-second video to consume a lot of content, right? Because you can do a lot more in video than 30 seconds reading through like blocks of text, right? So video by all means. And yet you brought up a good point. Like you don't have to have a $20,000 like designer on your, on your payroll. You know what I mean? Like nowadays you can throw up an ad on, we'll talk about this in a minute, on a couple of sites, or just an image. It doesn't even have to be polished, and you can run it, right? Sometimes like UGC, like you were kind of getting at with video, which is user generated content, which is more or less, let's go back to the dog thing. You could take a picture of a dog, like my Siberian Husky literally used to, flurries would come off of him, right? You could take a picture of that with like fur flurries coming off him, and you could literally use that as a Facebook post. In fact, that would probably do really well because people are like, what the heck is going on? It grabs attention, but it's also not a polished picture like you see on the TV that you're like, okay, that's produced.
It's relatable.
Yeah, right? It's totally relatable. Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, I guess as a pet business, it's a little bit easier, right? You've got cute dogs and cats and things going around. So that's nice to be able to grab onto. Okay, great. So I'm going to keep going. I see questions coming in. I'm definitely going to get to all of them. Let's go to the next slide here. Well, we were just talking about this, and I think that's a common misconception is, oh, but I don't know how to use Photoshop or anything like this. Canva is just so easy to use. I mean, what's your experience with that, or any other tools that anybody should be aware of?
There's a bunch of them out there now. It's so easy. I mean, like if you don't know, if you haven't used Canva, it's one of the easier tools to honestly to learn. You pop it open, they have templates you can use, right? Or you can upload your own and start on a blank template or a blank screen. But more or less, you can set up good looking ads. You can add some text to it. You can add some art if you want. And they really make it so it's easy to manipulate from a non-design perspective or non-tech perspective. So like I'm terrible with design. I know it looks good, but I'm terrible with design. I can go on Canva, create something that looks very pretty in like 3 minutes, right? And then you export them and you can throw them up on Facebook. So you can really set this thing up, really quickly. And there's a couple other different softwares to use, but as far as ads, I'd go Canva. There's another one that's kind of interesting to small businesses that they love. I think it's called like remove.bg. And what it does is like, if I take a picture of my screen right now, it would chop off everything around me and remove the background, right? So if I wanted to just place myself like in a Canva, if I wanted to say, let's put a blue or black background behind me and I want to put some text up here, I could go to remove.bg, remove everything behind me and then put this image on a black background with some text right here, right? And you could do this and they do it, upload, button click, remove background, and then copy, paste into Canva, and you can have the ad set up in 5 minutes.
Well, and I have great news for you, Rennie, because Canva actually just released that feature as well. So in theory, you only really need, I just did that a few days ago. So I think the point, right, is that you don't have to be a fancy marketer to do this. There are tools out there that will really help you. And I think that people don't want to see super polished and put together and branded, and they want to see the real stuff that's happening in your neighborhood, in your community. They want to relate to you in a lot of ways. So I know we've got a few minutes left here. I think we've got one more slide to cover, and then I just want to get to a few more questions.
Okay, so this is more or less like, do I do it myself, like I said, or do I hire somebody else? We talked about this a little bit earlier. If you're on the smaller side, you may want, the easier thing is to hire somebody, right? But we know how it goes. Like easy, cheap. What is it? Easy, cheap, quick, right? So you can only pick 2. So for some of the smaller ones, and again, like I was there, I did this for myself, right? And this is kind of how I got into the game actually, is you start really small and you test what works. The good thing is the business owner will always be better than any agency or anybody else as far as selling their own product. That's what you have going for you. So you may not know the tools and what exactly to do. You can learn that stuff, right? You're not spending $400 and $500 a day, most likely. If you are, you probably want to hire somebody. But if you're spending a little smaller budget, you can learn the tools, right? So and you can sell your business the best. You can also work 24 hours a day if you want to. Most people don't have the time, but you can work whenever you want, right? Most people that are going to work for you, they're going to have like a 9 to 5 or, maybe up till 7, 8 o'clock. They're not going to be up at 11 o'clock, right? Maybe you put the kid down and you want to get to work. They're not going to be there. They're not going to be able to collaborate with you, right? So you can do it whenever you want. We talked about it being cheaper. That's kind of a no-brainer, and also faster turnaround. Like if you want a lot of a lot of small business owners, they want stuff like now, right? If you hire an agency, like our stuff is pretty quick, right? But we still take a day or two to do some stuff, right, for our clients. Some people want stuff like today, right? If you want stuff like that, it's probably better for you to do it yourself. Now, the cons, like we talked about, is there is a steep learning curve on a lot of the stuff, right? So the more you start spending and the more your operation kind of evolves, and you need to use other tools and other platforms, it gets a little difficult to kind of learn it all at one time. Again, I've been there, right? There's a lot to learn, right? We talked about, you don't necessarily have past experience doing a lot of the stuff, right? The agency and professionals, they've seen everything, right? They might know, hey, by the way, that type of image isn't going to work, or this type of landing page isn't going to work. Or if you want calls for your dog business, we've done this before. Like this will work better than that, right? You don't have experience to build off of. And then also like the KPIs that we talked about. Like you might know the top, 4 or 5, but there's hundreds of KPIs that you could really look for that'll, again, drive you to make small little improvements here and there. And that's kind of the name of the game. So again, recommendation, if you're doing it small, definitely just do it by yourself 100%, right? You're just getting started. Don't waste the money on hiring people. If you have some money, right, the agency stuff, and I'll just kind of go through this because, it's kind of self-explanatory. If you do the agency stuff, obviously you can expedite through like the tried and true tactics that we talked about. Experience is huge in a lot of these cases. You generally have access to a lot of senior talent, right? It's not like necessarily just one person that's, hey, I'm an email marketer. Hey, I know Facebook ads. You have Facebook, you have a guy doing Facebook. You have a guy doing Google. You have an email marketer. You have a copywriter. You have a ton of talent, right, that's helping you in each different area. So there's a lot of people that can help you out there. Past experience we kind of talked about. And in a lot of cases, the agency, right, it's in the agency's best interest to, drive your business, right? If the agency does a poor job, they're not going to have a job very long, right? So it's in their best interest to drive your business so that they can kind of sustain their relationship with you. Now the cons, obviously, it's not the cheapest way to do it. Like a do-it-yourself. You don't, like we talked about, have 24/7 access. You might have it up till 5. You might have it up till 8. You probably don't have it at 11 p.m. like we talked about. And sometimes, again, these are remote people. You're not going to work directly with them day to day. So you're going to need to over communicate, right? You know your business best, right? And so an agency might be working off of a document that you shared with them in previous conversations, but they're not going to know every single detail, every reason why you made the business, all the things and decisions you made in the past, and how you may, stack up next to your competition. So you're going to have to over communicate these things so that your agent can be, your agency can be your sales arm and do just as good of a job as you. But that's kind of the challenge is, over communicating that stuff to them.
No, and I think that's super interesting, Randy. And the other thing I think we've noticed a lot of small businesses use is, when you hear the word agency, sometimes that's really scary, right? Because you're like this big company and it's huge. Yep. And the reality is there's so many different ways to get help that maybe not are as expensive as that, right? I mean, we've seen small businesses hire, interns that can figure this stuff out and put it into play, and they get to learn a skill too. So we've seen that happen. We've seen, contractors that you can find on like Upwork, for example, who's just like one person that maybe teaches you how to do it a few times, and then you can take it on. So there's lots of different ways to kind of become, ingrained in this. And it really just, to your point, depends on kind of where you're at with the journey and what you have to be able to spend. And because, so I think that's our last slide here. I want to get to a few questions. I know we're a little bit over time here. If you do have questions, like I said, please put them in the Q&A. I want to make sure we get to them, especially as we have our expert ready on to be able to answer them. So one question that came through that I think is really relevant is, are there any watch outs? So I'm new to Facebook, I'm new to Google. Is there something I can do to really mess it up? What are some things that you were like, oh yeah, make sure you have X, Y, and Z?
That's actually a good question, whoever put that in there. But there is definitely a few things. Without getting too technical, like one of the easiest things I can think of, for example, on Facebook is a lot of people are like, oh, I love traffic. I want traffic. there's a couple different objectives that you can do in Facebook. You can just do, for example, you can just create a post and you can do what's called a page post engagement, which means like, hey, I just want to pay for people to engage in my post, right? Right. And that doesn't mean they're going to click on your post and do anything, right? So a lot of people are like, oh, I like all these, I'm going to get 50 likes, 100 likes, 1,000 likes. Those vanity metrics might look good, but they're not going to actually drive any, any sales or leads or calls or whatever. So we see that a lot where people come in and select the wrong objective, right? Like a boosted post. That's like one of the most popular one. Hey, I'm going to boost my post. It's the same thing, right? You can boost your post. Facebook's just sending you traffic of people that are going to like it, right? So that's not going to do anything for you. So you can waste a ton of money doing stuff like that. Same thing for like, a lot of people choose brand awareness, which is, I just want to get in front of a lot of people. I want to get in front of most people, but it's not going to actually make people take an action, right?
So I want to really get into that because that feels like a really big mishap. So it's basically what you're saying is on Facebook, there are a few ways or options to select what you want that person to do.
Yes.
And sometimes we think it's working because we're getting lots of likes, which feels great, but actually you have to select it for more of a conversion option.
Correct. There's lead generation, right? Which might be okay. And there's, but the primary one is conversion. Like everybody wants something to happen. You're not spending money on Facebook unless you're like an influencer, right? To like get a bunch of, likes, right? You want something to happen. So yeah, the number one thing is they choose the wrong objective and then they get vanity metrics, whether it's post likes or comments or just visits. You can do like, hey, I want traffic. You can send traffic. None of it converts. It tends to be like lower quality people that Facebook knows has never bought anything, has never filled out a form, etc. So it's lower quality stuff. So they'll send the traffic, be like, oh my God, I'm getting all this traffic. It's great. It's not going to convert, right? And they're like, oh my God. And they're pulling their hair out. What can I do? Well, you chose the traffic. You chose the traffic ones, you're getting traffic, right? If you want conversions, which most people do, you need to select that one. For sure.
I love the way you call it too, vanity metrics.
Yeah, no, it sounds good. It looks good on paper, but then you look at the bottom of the funnel and you're like, not many sales here. So yeah.
So we got another one coming through as well in terms of targeting, right? So I want to target people that are close to my location and a certain age group.
Yep.
And something else. Like, is that possible in terms of the targeting? And I think this would be probably a Facebook question if we're targeting an audience.
Yeah. So Facebook, I mean, they give you everything. They used to give you a lot more. I mean, you could target people to the T. I mean, it was back in the day before some stuff, it was Cambridge Analytica that happened. So they removed some stuff. But yeah, you can target male versus female or both. You can target, like if you say, hey, by the way, tends to be only like an older demographic, tends to, to do our, to come into our service, right? I want to target 45 to 60, right? You can select the ages. So you can definitely do that. And then on top of that, there's interest targeting, which means like, let's go to the tutor one, right? If, you can select the age, you can select the gender, and then you can actually select, interested in tutoring or math or, studying. You can actually select some interests to narrow it from, let's say female 40 to 55, right? And they're interested in, studying, right? Maybe they need a tutor. So you can definitely capitalize and narrow the audience by selecting multiple different things at that.
Yeah, I love that example, right? So let's take the tutoring example. So, we all know that the SAT is something that tutors, I assume some of our even small businesses on the line are doing. So you could essentially, let's say 6 months before the SAT dates are going to happen, you could go ahead and put an ad out there to parents that are around the age of, people who would be taking the SAT, offer there, and then target a specific location, all within that same ad.
Perfect. I mean, what you could do is you could do it like, if you really wanted to, you could be like, my high school is called Pine Richland High School, right? So you could drop a pin if you really wanted to on the location of the school. And you could say like within it was more rural, there was a suburb. So you could say like within 10 miles of Pine Richland, right? I want to target people that are interested in SAT, that are, like you said, maybe to moms, to dads, let's say like, I don't know, 25 to 45, 50, right? And you can target that audience. And then you can get really specific in the ad copy. Again, relevance is key. Where you could say Pine Richland parents, right? Pine Richland High School parents Are
Yeah.
you interested in getting, some tutoring for your son or daughter? We're offering, discount on new students for the first lesson up to 45%, whatever it is. And then you can actually tailor the actual ad copy because it's right in that location, right? So that's something that you would layer on if you have, a geolocation. And again, we went back to the dog example, Santa Monica dog groomer, for example. That's one of those things you could do there. The thing is, you have to set up different audiences, right? And make sure your ads are just applying to those audiences, right? You don't want that ad to apply to other audiences.
Wow, very, very cool. We could talk all day about different targets with all these different businesses we have on here. I know that we're a little over. I want to just wrap it up here with a little bit about Finly. Finly, we have the awesome opportunity to get to work with small businesses to help them run their business. So we are a software that specifically is focused on payments. We essentially help you issue invoices, whether that's one-time or recurring, as well as scheduling, creating your own website page, being able to email your customers all at once. So we're really a one-stop shop for service businesses to run their business. So I also want to say that we didn't get to all the questions. I know there's a lot going on and there's a lot of questions. So if you have more questions, please email hello@finly.com, hello@finly.com, and we'll make sure to answer all of them. We're also going to go ahead and post the webinar recording on our blog, on our social media, so you can always access that. Just want to say thank you very much for everyone for joining. Hopefully you learned something from it. We do have webinars consistently, so we'd love to have you back. And a big thank you to Rennie for sharing all your expertise with us.
Definitely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up and say, see you next time.
See you guys.